So we are going to start topic number 3, that is towards CDM or civil disobedience movement. So before that, what we studied in the last two classes, that we will see. So in the last class we studied about the NCM, non-cooperation movement, and there we saw that why NCM started, and what was the need for NCM and how it unfolded in India, and what was the meaning of NCM, non-cooperation movement, for various section of societies. Like the parents were looking for something, they had different aspirations. The people in cities or in the towns had different aspirations. Then you saw that the tribals had their different aspirations. Okay, so those things were there. Now the CDM talks that civil disobedience movement. It says that let me come. Yeah, that in February 1922, Mahatma Gandhi decided to withdraw the non-cooperation movement. Now here is the question, that why did he decide to withdraw the NCM? Right now, see, there are two theories. The first, very simple and obvious theory, is that since a violent action took place in Chauri Chaura in Gorakhpur is in UP, and Gandhi was the ardent supporter of non-violence movement, and that is why, since this movement became violent, because what happened, that in Chauri Chaura, because of the police, or you can say the British government atrocities, people set a police station on fire. Okay, they burned the police station and 22 policemen died, burnt alive. Okay, so in that case it was a violent movement. Naturally, Gandhi was not supporter of any kind of violent movement. That's why Gandhi decided that we should withdraw. Right. Simultaneously, you have to understand that what Gandhi promised before NCM. Gandhi promised that if we do non-cooperation movement, if we start non-cooperation movement, within a year India will have Swaraj, self-rule, right? And if you remember, NCM started in January 1921, okay, and January 1922 came and gone also, right? And there was no Swaraj in sight. Okay, British government was not willing to relent. British government was not able to, you can say, British government was not willing to listen to these people, and the atrocities of the British government, or you can say their brutality, was increasing day by day. People also got frustrated. That 1 year, more than 1 year, if people are on the road and they are continuing the movement, it's not possible, because see, no movement can continue for a long period of time. Okay, movement can be for 10 days, 15 days, a month, or 2 or 3 months, fine, right? But it cannot continue for so many months, or you can say, let's say, the whole year. So people were also frustrated. Out of that frustration, we can say that people lost their temper, people lost their patience, and they set the police station on fire. Right? This is one theory. Alright, and that is why Gandhi decided to withdraw the movement. Second theory says that since Gandhi promised that within a year there will be Swaraj, and there was no Swaraj in sight, so Gandhi also wanted a safe passage to you can say, pull out the movement or withdraw the movement, right? And what was but you cannot suddenly one fine morning you wake up and Gandhi wakes up and he says that, okay, from tomorrow there will be no movement, I'm sorry for that, okay, we will think later. This cannot be done. So there should be a proper excuse, and that excuse came in the form of Chauri Chaura incident, okay, where 22 policemen died. Alright, so Gandhi also thought that this is the you can say, according to some historians, see, because see, if there is some action, of course people will think the positive side also and the negative side also, especially those people who were not supporter of Gandhi, or you can say the historians who did not like Gandhi or who did not support Gandhi, they started finding other you say other excuses or other theories, right? So this is what I'm telling you both the sides. Okay, always see both the faces of the coin. So Gandhi decided that since people are losing their patience, people are turning violent, and since we have committed to non-violent movement, so if people behave in this way, there is no point of you can say continuing the movement. Second theory says, the other side says that since Gandhi was also frustrated, and as he promised that within a year there will be Swaraj, and there was no Swaraj in sight, so Gandhi also wanted a safe escape or safe passage to withdraw the movement, right? Okay, and that is why this incident gave him a chance to withdraw the movement, and that is why he withdrew it. So here it says that he felt that the movement, I'm at topic number 3, okay, I don't know the page number, wait, page number is 38, I hope so. So he felt the movement was turning violent in many places, and satyagrahis needed to be properly trained before they would ready for mass struggle. Within the Congress, some leaders were now tired of mass struggle and wanted to participate in election in the provincial council that had been set up by the government of India Act of 1919. Okay, now listen. See, I told you that after a huge difficulty or after a huge persuasion, Gandhi was able to convince the Congress leaders of, you can say, Nagpur session of 1920 that NCM, we will start NCM, and this is how it will go on. Right, that time also some of the leaders did not want to give up the council election, okay, provincial elections, because I told you why, because the perks, the facilities, the power, the friends, all you get because of the council elections, they might be losing. That's why they did not want. Number one. Number two, other theory also says that these leaders did not want to boycott provincial elections. Why? Because if there will be no opposition in the house, or you can say in parliament or legislative assembly, the British government will come up with any kind of law the way they came up with the Rowlatt Act. Okay, so there must be some kind of opposition in the house, and that is why we need to be there. They were also correct, right? But okay, anyway, Gandhi was a big hero there, so they understood, okay, that at least let's go for 1 year or something, right? After that we will see. So now in February 1922, these leaders were also tired of every day standing in the on the road in the you can say intense heat or intense cold. So they were also tired of this, so they were also planning to somehow to other or the other to pull out the movement, right? They got a chance. So this was happening. Now another term comes, Government of India Act of 1919. See, Government of India, that means the British government, after every 10 years used to bring one kind of act, or you can say some reforms in the Indian political system. So the first act was, one can say, one of these acts was 1909. That means 1909. There was one the Government of India Act of 1909. It is called. That was also called Morley-Minto reform. That was, Minto was the what do you say? The Viceroy of India, and Morley was the Secretary of State, you can say Indian Secretary of India in the British Parliament. So both formulated one reform that was called Government of India Act of 1909, right? And it is now, after 10 years, again came Government of India Act of 1919, right? Okay, so in this act of the government came that, okay, we will have provincial election after every 5 years. These were the powers will be given to the Indian leaders. All these things were, so these leaders also were very excited to participate in the provincial election, okay, scheduled in let's say 1922 or something. So they felt that it was important to oppose British policies within the council, argue for reforms, or also demonstrate that these councils were not truly democratic. Why it was not democratic? I tell you. Some Indian leaders were allowed to debate in the house, but they were not allowed to vote. Okay, so in that case it is not a democratic system, because see, if government comes up with a policy, or you can say a rule or a law in the house, right, debate takes place, right? Okay, debate takes place. Indian leaders say, no, this is not good, this is anti Hindus, it is anti poor people, anti Indian or something like that. Eventually what happens, when the voting time comes, Indian leaders are not allowed to vote. So what is the use of entire debate? Because the Britishers are allowed to vote, right? And Britishers will do what they wanted to do already, right? They had already designed the purpose, right? So that is why it was not a democratic house, okay, or council. But anyway, unless you are there to make a lot of hue and cry and lot of opposition and all these things, there is no meaning. So you have to be there, otherwise this will become a dictatorship, right? So C.R. Das, Okay, C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru. Who know who is Motilal Nehru? Motilal Nehru was the father of Jawaharlal Nehru. Formed the Swaraj Party within the Congress to argue for a return to council politics. So within the Congress party, they formed Swaraj Party. That means those who are in favor of provincial election, the leaders, those who want to participate in the provincial election. So Swaraj Party. Okay, so they formed the Swaraj Party. It was not that they were separate from Congress. They were, you can say, a party within the Congress. Okay, that way. So, but younger leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose pressed for more radical mass agitation or for full independence. So these oldies, you can say the old leaders, they wanted to live a very nice life with having a big bungalow and a car and knocker, chakar, everything, right? In that case, they wanted that kind of politics. But the young leaders, young bloods, young blood boils very easily. So Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, these were the young leaders. So they wanted, no, we have to get full independence by hook or by crook, right? We have to do more mass agitation. So they were the supporter of Gandhi. So that was going on. In such a situation of internal debate and discussion, I am at paragraph number 2. In such a situation of internal debate and dissensions means opposition for good thing, okay, for greater good. Two factors again shaped Indian politics towards the late 1920s. That means you can say 1925, 1928 or something like that. The first was the effect of worldwide economic depression. That, economic depression, the Great Depression in of the US that came in 1928. Okay, that one. Agricultural prices began to fall in 1926 and collapsed in after 1930. That means what do you mean with this? That means those farmers, those who used to produce their product or crops for export, right, they were getting very less price. Why? Because worldwide the price of these commodities went very, very low. Right. So suppose I am a farmer, I am growing sugar cane or cotton, and I hope that by the end of this harvesting season I will get just consider 100,000 rupees. But since the market, the whole global market has crashed, I am not able to recover in my even my cost. Okay, I am not able to get, let's say, 40,000 also out of, forget about 100,000. So in that case, the entire system collapsed. The farmers became bankrupt. Okay, or as the demand for agricultural goods fell and export declined, peasants found it difficult to sell their harvest and pay their revenue. But doesn't matter what happened, whether it was economic depression or not, Britishers were adamant to collect the revenue as per decided. Right. Now the problem is that earlier the peasants used to pay the revenue because they were able to sell their goods at whatever price was available in the market that time. Now because of the economic depression, they are not able to recover even their cost. So in that case, how will they pay the revenue? But the Britishers always demanded, no, we want the revenue. Right? Anyhow, you sell yourself, you sell your properties, you sell your house, doesn't matter, you sell your utensils, but we need our revenue. Right? So that is why the Indian peasants and all became very angry. So by 1930, the countryside was in turmoil because India is the country of villages, and most of the production used to take place that time in the villages, and the villagers were not able to get enough price. Okay, I will not say good price, enough price. That's why they were very in a bad shape. Against this background, the new Tory government in Britain constituted a statutory commission under Sir John Simon. Okay, so Sir John Simon was one of the leaders, and under his you can say leadership, the British government formed one committee, or you can say commission, and that was supposed to visit India in 1928 so that they can study the problems and they can study what kind of reforms India needed, because just now I told you that after every 10 years there used to be a Government of India Act, Government of India Act of 1909, Government of India Act of 1919. Now in 1929 was in 1929 another act was due, right? So this man was supposed to come, set up in response to the nationalist movement. The commission was to look into the functioning of the constitutional system in India and suggest changes. Now if question comes that what was the main aim of Simon Commission, right? Okay, you will write this one, that The commission was to look into the functioning of the constitutional system, that means the constitution or the Government of India Act of 1919, how far it was successful and where it failed. Based on that feedback, we will bring a new system. Of course, whatever system they will bring, that is not going to be the benefit for India, right? That will be eventually more exploitative only. But of course, give some rebate of the carrot and the dangle type of situation will go on, right? The problem was that the commission did not have a single Indian member. That was the most, can say, the immediate cause of this movement, or why? Because see, the leaders are coming to decide the fate of India. Leaders are from England are coming to India to decide what changes should be brought in India, and no Indian is there. So how can the people, Britishers, will bring changes or reforms if they do not know exactly what India is? So in the commission, at least there should be one or two Indians, but there was no Indian. That is why people were very antagonized, or you can say very angry. That means that the Britishers did not even think that we are capable enough to give them suggestion, right? And they did not even think of including any one of us. That is why these people were very angry. So they were all British. So all the three members of the commission were British, and that's why the Indians were very angry. When the Simon Commission arrived in India in 1928, it was greeted with the slogan "Go back, Simon." All parties, including the Congress and the Muslim League, participated in the demonstration. So you can see here, you can see a ray of hope, of you can say the unity, that Congress and the Muslim League. I told you in the last class what Muslim League was. Muslim League was formed in 1906, right? Okay, in Simla on the pretext of the British Viceroy that time. Okay, so Muslim League also felt very bad that these people do not consider us to be worthy enough of being a member of this commission, right? So even Muslim League also participated in this demonstration, and in an effort to win them over, the Viceroy, Lord Irwin, okay, don't read Irwin, it is Irwin, announced in October 1929 a vague offer of dominion status. That means it was not clear. India will be given dominion status. What do you mean by dominion status? Ab dominion status mein kya hota hai? I'm telling you what happens in dominion status. That the head of the country will be, what you say, the British, of course, okay, and the other portions, you can say the chief ministers will be the Indians, the ministers may be Indians, and major ministries like finance, defense, home, the home ministry, all these will be controlled by the Britishers, and most of the other departments or the ministries will be given to the Indians, right? But they will work for the British crown. So that is called dominion status. Okay, just vaguely understand. So Irwin offered that by October 1929, India will be given dominion status. Now the Indians were in full mood of getting full independence, complete independence, right? That means no Britishers. And what are they offering? They are offering dominion status. That means on your head there will be a British man, right? Okay, so that was not you can say liked by the Indians. So a vague offer of dominion status for India in an specified future. That means by what year? 1930, 31, 32. That was also not given. Okay, in future it is said. In future means what? In future, next day or next decade or next century, who knows? Okay, and a round table conference to discuss the future constitution. This did not satisfy the Congress leaders. Okay, this did not satisfy the Congress leader and the radicals within the Congress. Okay, so just first let's discuss this one. So round table conference to discuss the future constitution. That means the Indian leaders have to come to London, right? Their round table conference will go on, right? And there we all will discuss the future course of you can say politics or the constitution of India, right? This will take place. But the Indians were not satisfied because see, I told you the rise of nationalism was so much in India by the time that we were completely in the mood to get full independence. Okay, complete independence, no dominion status or no any kind of British interference in our politics. right? So they did not, this did not satisfy the Congress leaders. The radicals within the Congress, understand the meaning of radicals? Radicals are the young blood people, those who wanted, you can say, a complete change, or you can say they wanted, a thorough change in the society or in the politics, that they are called radicals. So radicals within the Congress, led by Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, became more assertive. The liberals and moderates, the oldies, who were proposing a constitutional system within the framework of British dominion, gradually lost their influence. See, every time since 1885, these old people, so you can say the old leaders of the Congress, were dominating, right? But now it was time for the young blood, okay, the young men. So these young men were more now influential, because they had already seen that these oldies did not do anything, they did not bring much changes or any desired changes since 1885, with the inception of, you can say, or the foundation of the Congress, right? Okay, and it is now 1930, or okay, approaching 1930. So you're concerned 45 years. What did you do? Nothing. Right. The only thing you see that when Gandhi came in 1915, the three struggle or the mass struggle he did, that was successful one. NCM was of course successful, not successful too much, but of course I will say that it was successful, because that showed the Indians that how to participate in mass struggle, and without mass struggle no movement or no movement can be successful, right? So that was also fine. So these things were going on. So now these young men like Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose and others were more, Bhagat Singh, you can say, Chandrasekhar Azad, Surya Sen, these were the leaders. They were of course the radicals, more radicals. So these leaders were more influential in the Congress, and these oldies were marginalized. In December 1929, under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress formalized the demand of Purn Swaraj. Now see Lahore Congress. Remember this one. In December 1929, Lahore Congress took place, and there Purn Swaraj was declared. That means India will get nothing less than Purn Swaraj, or complete independence or full independence, no dominion status. Now see, just the above two lines says that liberals and the moderates wanted that the constitutional reform should be in such that under the dominion status, that means Britishers should be there and we should also get some power, right? Okay, so that means they wanted that Britishers should be there. Jan Gan Man Adhinayak Jai Hai, that means these leaders should be there, no problem. Okay, these are our, you can say, our Adhinayak or the dictators, so they should hail, they should flourish, and under them, under their umbrella, we should also flourish, right? But the young leaders were not in that mood, so they completely wanted that we want full independence. Okay, so in Lahore session, Lahore, that time partition had not taken place, right? India, Pakistan, Bangladesh were together. So in 1929, Lahore session took place. Lahore is in Pakistan, for your information. So formalized the demand of Purn Swaraj or full independence for India, and it was declared at 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as Independence Day, when people were to take a pledge to struggle for complete independence. So now you understand the date. Try to understand 26th January. Why we have Republic Day on 26th January? Why not on 24th, or why not on 27th? Because in 1920 Lahore Congress, in 1920 December, we decided that 26th January will be our Independence Day whenever we will get independence. Number one, okay. Number one, and try to understand that whether we get independence or not, we will celebrate our Independence Day every year on 26th January. But we got independence on 15th August, right? So how to keep this date alive? Okay, because you cannot say that the British said, oh no, I don't want independence on 15 January, give me 15 August, give me our independence on 26 January. So you stay here for another 5 months, no problem. Because we have already decided that we will celebrate our independence on 26 January. That's not advisable, right? Okay, whenever you get independence, grab it. So that is why, to keep this historic date alive, we are celebrating our Republic Day on 26 January. Okay, because we got independence on 15th August, right? So that's why these two dates, that 15th August and 26th January, are our national holidays and national important day. Okay, so would we celebrate it as our Independence Day when people were to take a place to struggle for complete independence? But the celebration attracted very little attention. So Mahatma Gandhi had to find a way to relate this abstract idea of freedom to more concrete issues of everyday life. So Gandhi thought that, naturally Gandhi was the leader that time. So Gandhi thought that, okay, people are not paying heed to it and people are not very you can say enthusiastic about it, so what to do? So Gandhi decided that, okay, we have to do something more. All right, and already see, that was 1930, it was the year 1930. All right, NCM had already passed 10 years ago, 1921 or 1920. It was decided that we will have non-cooperation movement. Okay, and next 10 years there was no big struggle or something, no mass movement took place. So now it was a time to start a movement, because see, economic depression was going on that time. The farmers, the businessmen, the industrialists, all were in very bad shape. Simon Commission came. Simon Commission did not consider any Indian to be the part of that commission, so that was another issue, right? Despite all the hardships and all, the British government was still adamant to collect all the revenue and all these things. So in that case, Gandhi decided now it's time to start another you can say movement. So CDM started, Civil Disobedience Movement. So topic number 3.1 says the Salt March and the Civil Disobedience Movement. So why Salt March? Okay. So Mahatma Gandhi found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the nation. Everybody uses salt, right? Whether you are Bill Gates or you are Ambani or whoever you are, everybody uses salt. Whether you are a Hindu or a Muslim or whatever, right? Salt is an essential commodity for our everyday life. Okay, and rich, poor, everybody uses salt, equally, whatever their you can say consumption is. So salt is a powerful symbol that could unite the nation. On 31st January 1930, he sent a letter to Viceroy Irvin stating 11 demands. So that is called Gandhi's 11 demands to Irvin. Okay, some of these were of general interest, that means bring revenue rate down, something. Others were specific demands of different classes, from industrialists to peasants, for everyone. That means peasants should be given some rebate, industrialists should be given this kind of facilities, or you can say this kind of concession, all these. Because that time it was very hard for the Indian industrialists to take loan from bank. Okay, it was very hard for them to import machines from foreign country. They had to pay huge duties. If you are a British manufacturer, if you are importing good, if you are importing any good or any machinery from England or Europe, you have to pay a nominal amount of tax. But if you are an Indian industrialist, you have to pay a huge amount of tax. So in that case, you can understand that what this kind of, if discrimination goes on, naturally this is not good for the healthy economic development of a country, right? So these were the some of the demands. The idea was to make the demands wide ranging so that all classes within Indian society could identify with them and everyone could be brought together in the united campaign. So Gandhi tried to include most of the demands that was affecting everyone. It is not the peasant should say, oh, I have been left alone, or the Muslim says, no, I have been left alone, or the industry says that, oh, nobody cared for us. They consider that we have a lot of money, so nobody cared for us. So Gandhi tried to include all the important, you can say, the points of everyone, right? And that was culminated into 11 points. The most stirring of all was the demand to abolish salt tax. Now understand what was happening here. Salt tax. The British government or the British rule in India was so brutal that they were taxing even salt. Salt is a commodity which is used by the poor and the rich alike, right? Even the poorest of the poor also use salt, right? So in that case, if they have to pay tax, you can try to understand the inhuman phase of the British government, right? So Gandhi said that abolition of salt tax. That means, and that time salt was a monopoly commodity. Monopoly commodity means only government was allowed to produce and sell salt. Okay, so those villagers who were producing salt on the coast of you can say Arabian Sea or Bay of Bengal. They were producing under the supervision of the British government, and they were not allowed to sell even a single pinch of salt without their consent and in the open market. Right? Today what happens? In India also we produce opium. You know opium? Okay, opium is you can say a drug type of thing, right? हिंदी में उसको अफीम भी बोलते हैं, otherwise it is opium or poppy also. In India it is produced, but it is produced under the government control. So the villagers who are producing, they have to keep an account of each and every stick of opium. That means that opium is used by the government of India, and that is sold to the pharmaceuticals, or you can say the drug companies. That means those companies which make, और चार्जर लेके आओ बेटा इसका, so drug companies, or you can say the today, because see, if opium is produced everywhere, opium is illegal product. So if everybody start producing illegal, that means there will be a drug market in the country, right? Okay, like see in the US last year, marijuana became, you can say, legal or somewhere illegal in some states or something like that. So it's a drug, and drugs should not be sold in an open market. Okay, otherwise everybody in the house, they will start in the gamla or in the pot, they will start growing these kind of plants. So it's not good. That is why what government does is that government regulates, and these are painkillers basically, right? So that is important for the medicine companies, right? That is why the government controls, right? That time, during the British time, salt was also one such commodity which was controlled by the government. Why? Because they wanted to earn more and more money, right? That's why they were controlling. So of course Gandhi demanded that the salt law should be abolished. So now here it says salt was something consumed by the rich and the poor alike, and it was one of the most essential item of food. The tax on salt and the government monopoly over its production, Mahatma Gandhi declared and revealed the most oppressive face of British rule. That is what I told you, that you can understand the inhuman face of the British government, that they are taxing even the salt, right? Okay, if you are taxing sugar, I understand that. Okay, how many people in India are able to, let's say, eat mithai or something, so that is okay. But salt is used by everyone, and British government is taxing this one, so that's so bad. That's why Gandhi demanded this one. Naturally, salt was, you can say, one of the main items of, you can say, revenue for the Britishers. So they were of course not going to budge, or they are not going to listen. So Mahatma Gandhi's letter was in a way it was an ultimatum that if you don't abolish, we are going to start another one. Okay, another movement. If the demands were not fulfilled by 11th March, you see that he specifies the date also. The letter stated the Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign. Irvin was unwilling to negotiate. Why he was unwilling to negotiate? Because if he negotiates, that means government is under pressure, and that will give a psychological win to the Indians. That we see, this is how we can exploit every time the British government, right? Okay, so naturally he was the boss of the whole country, Irvin, so he is not going to negotiate. So Mahatma Gandhi started his famous salt march, accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. So you have to remember that how many volunteers he started with. Okay, 78. And the march was over 240 miles. So you can understand how many kilometers. So 1.6 multiplied by 240 will give you the kilometers. Okay, for Gandhi's ashram to in Sabarmati to Gujarat coastal town of Dandi, the volunteers walked for 24 days, about 10 miles a day. Thousands came to hear Mahatma Gandhi wherever he stopped, and he told them that what he meant by Swaraj, and urged them to peacefully defy the British. That means peacefully you start you can say disrespecting or disobeying the British laws, Okay, so this one. So on 6th April, he reached Dandi and ceremonially violated the law manufacturing salt by boiling seawater. So what he did, that he took 1 liter of water, salt seawater, and he boiled and he made salt. On that, Churchill, or I don't know who, yeah, Churchill was there, or some the Prime Minister of England said that a naked fakir, if he boils sea water, right, that is not going to shake the British Empire, which is everywhere, or you can say throughout the world, right? So this is how he tried to belittle the importance of, or the magnitude of this movement. Anyway, so this marked the beginning of civil disobedience movement. And how was this movement different from the non-cooperation movement? This you have to understand. Okay, so this question is very, very important, that how this movement was different from non-cooperation movement, because every time you are coming with the same type of movement, people say that this has started 10 years ago also, we got nothing, right, only bloodshed and all this hardship and all these things. So it will also have the same thing. So then naturally this movement has to be different. So how it was different, that you have to understand. People were now asked not only to refuse cooperation with the British, okay, as they had done in 1921-22, but also to break colonial laws. So this is how it was different. That in the NCM, what was happening? People were asked to not to cooperate with the government. That means you resign from jobs, okay, don't go there, don't use British goods, boycott and all these things. You already have seen that, right? Simultaneously, this time a new feature was added, and that was what? Breaking the colonial laws. Okay, so if government says that there is a curfew, you know there is no curfew. If you have to do this, no, we will not do this. Okay, this is the government rule, no, this is not the government rule, like that. Okay, the salt law. So it's thousands in different parts of country broke the salt law, manufactured salt and demonstrated in front of the government salt factories. As the movement spread, foreign clothes was boycotted, the liquor shops were picketed, peasants refused to pay revenue and the chowkidari taxes, that means the night watch, the villages. So the village officials resigned, and in many places forest people violated forest laws, going into the reserve forest to collect woods and graze cattle. So I told you in the last class that forests were categorized in three categories. One was the protected one, the reserved one, and the common one, right? Okay, so in reserved forest nobody was allowed to go, so people started going to the reserve forest also. Okay, so this is how they started defying the British law or breaking the British rules. So worried by the development, the colonial government began arresting the Congress leader one by one. This is what they could do. This led to the violent clashes in many places. When Abdul Ghaffar Khan, he was from, you can say, Pakistan, Afghanistan side Pakistan, okay, a devout disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, was arrested in April 1930. Angry crowds demonstrated in the street of Peshawar. Peshawar is in Pakistan, facing armored cars and police firing. Many were killed. A month later, when Mahatma Gandhi himself was arrested, industrial worker in Sholapur attacked police posts, municipal buildings, law courts, railway stations, all structures that symbolized British rule. So this is how it started. That means now Gandhi also gave him a free hand, not to kill but to destroy the public buildings, or you can say whatever. So this was happening. Okay, so this was CDM. So understand that how CDM was different from NCM, right? Instead, apart from boycotting and non-cooperating, the people were asked to break the British laws, right? So that is one line question, or you can say if this question comes for 3 marks, you just write down how they broke the law. People started making salt, they started selling the salt, right? Okay, and people started destroying the buildings and attacked the public buildings and all this. A frightened government responded with a policy of brutal repression. Peaceful satyagrahis were attacked, women and children were beaten, and 100,000 people were arrested. So now you can see that still you see the people were not violent. Okay, people were not killing or beating any British official or the police, right? So these were the peaceful people, but then also many got killed and many got arrested. All these happened. Okay, in such a situation, Mahatma Gandhi once again decided to call off the movement and entered into pact with Irving on 5th March 1931. Now see, again Gandhi withdrew. Okay, so Gandhi, you can say, was in the habit of withdrawing when the movement was at its peak. Same thing happened in 1922 when movement was at its peak. Gandhi suddenly withdrew. No, we don't want. Again, the same thing happened on 5th March 1931. Gandhi again withdrew. So that's why the people, what is this? When we are in good shape, now we can get something or gain something. Now Gandhi is withdrawing. What is this going on? Okay, so Gandhi entered in a pact with Lord Irwin, and by this Gandhi-Irwin pact, Gandhi consented to participate in a RTC, that is called Round Table Conference. Okay, so we had 3 RTCs, Round Table Conference, RTC number 1, RTC number 2, RTC number 3. Now, why was this important? Because see, Congress was the biggest political party in India. Right, in RTC 1, which took place, I don't exactly remember, it was in 1930. So when RTC 1 took place in London, Congress did not participate. So without the biggest political party, the RTC had no meaning. Okay, and when I say RTC, RTC does not mean that it is, you can say, it was the table was round. It's not like that. Okay, so RTC means, oh God, what happened? Wait a minute. Okay. Yes. Okay. So RTC was not actually round because so many hundreds of leaders are sitting over there, because we had so many leaders from Congress, then Muslim League, then other Justice Party, and many other parties were there. Okay. So it was actually, you can say, natural type of table, right? But it was arranged in the room on the wall sides. Okay. So but it is called RTC, Round Table Conference. So Gandhi did not participate in the first RTC, so there was no meaning of RTC. Right. So now Gandhi decided, okay, he will participate in the second RTC, right? And that is why he withdrew in the movement, because he thought that if we go to the RTC, government has already seen our power and all. Maybe government will relent and government will give us some good things, right? Whatever will happen, that will be seen later. So Gandhi decided to participate in the RTC. Okay, so here it said in the bracket, the Congress had boycotted the first RTC in London, and the government agreed to release the political prisoners. Okay, and government also, that means Irwin, agreed that whoever the political prisoners have been arrested, those leaders will be released. Right. So this was the pact between Gandhi and Irwin, that is called Gandhi-Irwin Pact. But try to understand, that time Bhagat Singh was arrested and he was sentenced to death, right? But Gandhi did not put this point in his Gandhi-Irwin Pact, okay, and he let him die, or you can say he did not advocate the release, or he did not press for the release of Bhagat Singh and his other 2 friends. Right. Now the question is why. So people criticize for this, for other leaders, or you can say other historians criticize that Gandhi was so mean that he was, in favor of hanging of Bhagat Singh and all, while Bhagat Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev were the heroes of the Indian independence struggle. But Gandhi, if you see the Gandhi's point, Gandhi was always, you can say, in opposition of, you can say, Gandhi always opposed the violent movement. On Bhagat Singh, Rajguru and Sukhdev, these 3 were the leaders of the violent groups. So that's why Gandhi says that no, I will not press for their release, right? So this was his logic. Anyway, so when he was asked that why he did not demand the release of these 3, so Gandhi said that I admire their valor, I admire their sacrifices and all these things, but of course I am supporter of non-violent means of, you can say, struggle. Anyway, so Gandhi went to London in 1931, in December 1931, for the conference, but the negotiation broke down and he returned disappointed. Back in India, he discovered that the government had begun a new cycle of repression. Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru were both in jail, and the Congress had been declared illegal. That means Congress party is an illegal party now. This was not done first time. So Congress was declared an illegal party. That means if anyone who is considered a Congressee, right, they will be arrested. The Congress cannot have the office open. Congress cannot do any press release. Congress cannot talk to any media or something, because it is an illegal party now. Okay, so this happened. All right. So Congress had been declared illegal, and a series of measures had been imposed on prevent meetings, demonstration, and boycotts. So Congress cannot call upon a meeting or a strike or any kind of movement or boycott something. Okay, because Congress had been declared illegal political party. With great apprehensions, Mahatma Gandhi relaunched the CDM again for over a year. The movement continued, but by 1934 it lost its momentum. As I told you, that no movement can go for n number of years, or you can say indefinite period of time. It has to die down sooner or later, because people will lose their enthusiasm, people will lose their courage, people will have other work also. So not people will not always remain unemployed or not doing anything, and they will always on the streets or roads. It's not possible, right? So that is why by 1934 it lost its momentum and it completely died down. Now it says that you have seen that how NCM was perceived and what was the outcomes of NCM. Now we are going to see the outcomes of CDM, how participants saw the movement. Okay, and we will see that what was the different aspirations of the people of India, okay, regarding CDM. So let us now look at the different social groups that participated in the CDM, and why did they join the movement, what were their ideals, and what did Swaraj mean to them. Okay, so again we will go to the village first. So in the countryside, rich peasants communities like the Patidar of Gujarat and the Jat of Uttar Pradesh were active in the movement. Being producers of commercial crops, they were hit hard by the trade depression and falling price. As their cash income disappeared, they found it impossible to pay the government revenues demand, but I told you that government was adamant, and the refusal of the government to reduce the revenue demand led widespread resentment. Okay, so that's why the peasants participated in this movement, because they had already seen that British government is not going to give any kind of concession or any kind of relaxation, right? Even in such a bad time, they are still demanding the same rate of revenue. So in that case, it is better to support the Congress rather than supporting the British government. This happened. And the okay, now it says the rich peasants became enthusiastic supporters of CDM movement, organizing their communities and at times forcing reluctant members to participate in the boycott programs. For them, the fight for Swaraj was a struggle against high revenue. Remember this line. Okay, you can underline this. Fight for Swaraj means struggle against higher revenue. You saw the same thing was there in the NCM. But in NCM, you saw that the landless laborers, the small petty farmers, these people had high hopes from NCM, and the NCM for them was not against the British rule. NCM for them was against the landlords, the talukdar and all these. Right? Okay, because they had not seen any British government or British people that time. Right? For them, the tools of operation was the jamindars or the landlords. These were the people who were exploiting them. So NCM was for them. Now here in CDM, we will see the rich peasants. The rich peasant participated in the movement, okay, and they supported the Congress and the CDM because they were not happy with the style of working of the British government. Right, that okay. So this is how you can differentiate what was happening in NCM, what kind of peasants were in NCM, what kind of peasants are now in CDM. So you can see the differences. All right, okay, but they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the revenue rates being revised. Okay, so revenue rates were not revised, and there was no relaxation or concession given to them. By the time Gandhi entered into a pact with Lord Irwin, okay, and he called off. or he withdrew the movement. So when the movement was restarted in 1932, many of them refused to participate. So these leaders were also there. Oh my God, Congress is like this only. So Congress, instigated us, and now suddenly Congress withdrew. So and we got nothing. We got nothing. Okay, so when Gandhi came back from London and when Gandhi started relaunched the movement, these people did not participate because they thought that nothing is going to change. Okay, that way. Now let's talk about the poor peasants. The poorer peasantry were not just interested in the lowering of the revenue demand. Many of them were small tenants cultivating land they had rented from landlords. As the depression continued and cash income dwindled, the small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent. They wanted the unpaid rent to the landlords to be remitted. They joined a variety of radical movements, they often led by the societies and communities, communist, okay, and the socialist also. So here it says that secret societies, the socialists and the communists, they had the secret movements and all this. So these poor peasants joined them. They did not join the Congress because they had already seen what happened in 1920, okay, or in 21 NCM. So they got nothing. All right, so this was happening. So you saw that the poor the rich peasant enthusiastically participated in the movement, but eventually they got nothing. The poor peasants were not interested because they knew that nothing is going to change, right? So rather than opting Congress, they opted socialist and you can say the communist people. All right, okay. Okay, apprehensive of the raging issues that might upset the rich peasant and landlord, the Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaign in most places. So you see, again I tell you that Congress was again in a very dilemma that what to do. If the Congress tries to woo, or you can say to persuade the small peasants for the no revenue campaign, the landlords who are the members of the Congress, they will not get anything or they will be angry. So the Congress was in a very kind of dilemma that what to do and what not to do. They did not want to lose the lower farmer because that was the majority, right? This was the base of the Congress, and they did not want to simultaneously antagonize the landlords, okay, or you can say the zamindars, because these zamindars were the financiers, these zamindars were the supporters or the members of the Congress. So that was going on. Naturally you cannot have both the things. Either you eat the cake or leave the cake, right? So you cannot enjoy both the things. So anyway, so I'm at the next page again. What about the business class? So you saw what peasants were thinking and what peasants did and how they reacted. Now we are talking about the business classes. How did they relate to the CDM during the First World War? Indian, it's nothing, just I'm recording also, so please keep quiet. So during the First World War, Indian merchants and industrialists had made huge profits and became powerful. Why? They became powerful because the British government started demanding a lot of goods because of the First World War. They started demanding uniforms, they started demanding boots, then the bags and many other war related items, right? So they started placing huge orders to these industrialists. So these industrialists started making goods for the British army, right? So they made a lot of money. So the Indian merchants and industrialists made huge profits and became powerful, keen on expanding their business. They now reacted against the colonial policies that restricted their business activities. I told you in the beginning that how that discrimination used to take place if you are a British manufacturer or if you are an Indian manufacturer, right? Okay, so based on that, of course, they were also not very happy with the British government and their rules. So they wanted. So what was their grievances? Just try to understand what were their grievances. So here it came. They wanted protection against import of foreign goods. Try to understand. This is economics. Because what was happening, that because of the foreign goods coming to India without any duty, the foreign goods were mostly very cheap in India, and because of that these Indian manufacturers stood no chance because their cost of manufacturing was more than these imported goods. So naturally, being a consumer, you will go for the cheaper goods, right? Quality is same, okay, foreign goods are cheaper than, you can say, the Indian goods, then why will I buy the Indian goods? Okay, I am a nationalist, that is okay. But if I see that your product is going to hit my pocket hard, naturally I will go for something which is not so expensive, right? So they wanted protection against imports of foreign goods. That means if foreign goods are imported, they should also be taxed. That means there should be tariff, or you can say trade barrier. Not enough, not too much of goods should be imported to India. There should be a quota system, and if goods are imported to India, there should be a tax on them, import tax they have to pay, right? Okay, this was not happening that time. So that was their on one point. And a rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. That means the rupee and sterling, the British pound, okay, that exchange ratio should be in such a way that when the foreign goods come here to India, it should be expensive, right? So just try to understand, because that is a big economics, so that I will not explain to you now. So understand that rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio, okay, because see, today also when we check that 100 yen equals to how many rupees, or 100 yen equals to how many dollar, or something like that. So this is how we calculate that whether the Indian money, Indian currency, or the Japanese currency is getting stronger or weaker. So, and the rupee sterling, okay, that I told you. To organize business interests, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce of Industries, FICCI, that is called FICCI, in 1927. So remember this, you have to understand, you have to memorize the full form of FICCI. That means Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries, and secondly you have to memorize the year of foundation. That means when was this formed? So it was formed in 1927. Okay, so the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries started in 1927. So that was a group of, you can say, the businessmen, exporters, importers, manufacturers, okay, and they have made their own organization so that they can discuss their issues, they can press their demands to the government and all these things, okay. Led by the prominent industrialists like Purushottam Das, Thakur Das and G.D. Birla, the industrialists attacked colonial control over the Indian economy and supported the CDM when it was first launched. Okay, so they supported the CDM and they attacked the British policies on Indian economy. So they gave financial assistance and refused to buy or sell imported goods. So you see that imported goods were, they decided that we will neither buy or nor sell the imported goods, number one, okay, and they gave money to the Congress, okay, so that the movement should be strong enough, okay. So movement should not die down because of lack of money or funds. So this is what they did. Most businessmen came to see Swaraj at a time when colonial restrictions on business would no longer exist and trade and industry would flourish without constraint. So here you can see that what they saw, they were willing, or they had aspirations that Swaraj means no colonial restrictions on business, right, and trade and industry would flourish without any restrictions, okay. So this is what it says here. So that was their demand or their aspirations. But after the failure of RTC, business groups were no longer uniformly enthusiastic. Now because the second roundtable conference failed, and when these people understood, these businessmen, that we are not going to gain anything immediately, naturally they became not enthusiastic, and they saw that this is not going to happen. So they were apprehensive of the spread of militant activities and worried about prolonged disruption of businesses, as well as of the growing influence of socialism amongst the younger members of the Congress. Now understand, try to understand what is the meaning of growing influence of socialism. That means society will have everything for everyone, right, and there people will be not allowed to amass, or you can say accumulate private properties, okay, or personal property. That means the resources of the country or the society will be distributed according to the needs of everyone, right. So this is called, and while industrialists do what? They exploit the workers and they make money, right? Okay, they exploit the workers and they make money or they make profits. But in socialism, what happens, that that money will be used for the welfare of other people, or you can say for the weaker section and everyone. So if society needs a school, school will be there for everyone. Okay, it's not that it is a school for rich people or poor people. It's not like that. So naturally the young members would like to have that kind of system. So because of that, the industrialists were a little apprehensive that if this happens, what will happen to our businesses? Our businesses will come into their hands and they will distribute the resources in the society. So what will we do, right? So that is why they had this kind of apprehensions. That is, yes, very much, because most of the leaders of India had visited you can say Russia after, mostly after 1925, because I tell you in 1924, yes, if I am not mistaken, in 1924 the Communist Party of India was founded. Okay, you see the Russian Revolution took place in 1917. Lenin died in 1925, right? And in the very same year, Stalin came after Lenin. Okay, my son is saying Stalin came. So then Dr. M.N. Roy, I don't know exactly the full name of that man. So M.N. Roy was the founder of the Communist Party of India in 1925. So naturally communism says what? That there will be no personal property, everything will be given, everyone will be given everything, right? And there will be free schools, free hospitals, everybody will get employment, everybody will have everything. So in that case that's a very good society, especially in the country like India where people are very poor, right? Okay, so because of these kind of mentality, right, the industrialists were a little apprehensive that we have made so much of money, we have our industries. If the Congress is dominated by the socialist groups and we get independence, then all our private properties will be nationalized, right? And this will become national property. And since government is powerful, so government can do anything in the country, right? The way the Britishers are doing today, okay, tomorrow the Congress will do the same thing. So in that case, what will happen? Our industries and big so much of wealth, we have all this. So that is why these industrialists, or you can say the business class, also got a little scared. So that is the next one. Now I'm in the next paragraph, so I will finish this page and we will finish this class today. So it says, the next paragraph says the industrial working classes. Now we are talking about industrial working classes. So we saw the peasants, we saw the business class, now we are talking about the working class. Okay, so the industrial working classes did not participate in the CDM in large numbers except in Nagpur region. So try to understand that in Nagpur region only the industrial worker class participated, otherwise other people mostly remained isolated. So as the industrialists came closer to the Congress, workers stayed aloof. Now see what was happening. When industrialists started supporting the Congress, the workers thought that Congress is now being backed by the industrialists. And industrialists and the workers are always like north and south. Okay, why? Because industrialists are the people who exploit the workers and they make money and the workers get nothing, right? A country becomes $100 company becomes $200, but a worker salary does not increase in that way. So where is this $200? $100 company becomes $200. Why? Because the profits were not shared among us, or the industrialists, or you can say the owner did not share the profit with the workers, and the factory is not run by the owner, it is run by the workers. Okay, and we do not get anything, we get only our salary, right? Okay, and these people are making money. That is why the working class did not support the Congress this time. Why? Because they saw that industrialists are financing the movement. Okay, so industrialists are financing the movement, and naturally if the industrialists are financing, the working class will not be there. Okay, but in spite of that, some workers did participate in the CDM, selectively adapting some of the ideas of Gandhian program like boycott of foreign goods as part of their own movement against low wages and poor working conditions. This is what they demanded. there were strikes by the railway workers. Thank you. There were strikes by railway workers in 1930 and the dock workers in 1932. So these people are strike. In 1930, thousands of workers in the Chota Nagpur tin mines wore Gandhi caps and participated in protest rallies and boycott campaigns. But Congress was reluctant to include workers' demand as part of their program of struggles. Why? Because if the workers' demand are included, that means better working condition, better wages, then that is going to hit the pockets of those industrialists who are financing their programs, right? So naturally, both the things cannot be together, right? You have to have only one thing, right? Either you have the industrialist with you or you have the workers with you. Alright, because those things are just north and south, so both the direction cannot. So it felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide the anti-imperial forces. And industrialists are basically, see, industrialists are the people who are mostly enjoying a lot or the most in whether India is independent or India is under the British rule. I understand that under the British rule they are making less money, but at least they are much better than the other sections of the society. So what is the problem? They have their own, you can say, wealth, they have cars, they have bungalows, they have industries, they are having good British friends. So what is the problem? Right? Okay. So they will support the British government then. They will support the British government. So in that case, if they support the British government, the Congress will never win this battle. So naturally they decided to go with the industrialists rather than going with the working class. Alright? So understood how the two things cannot go together. Another important feature of CDM was the large scale participation of women. Now you can say this is one of the most striking things. But women participation because of Gandhi's going village to village and addressing everyone, because Gandhi always thought that it is always better to fight with both the hands rather than one hand. So if half of the population remain in the house, right, and half of the population is fighting the Britishers, it's not good. So women should also come out and they should also participate in the national movement, right? So this is one striking feature here. You can see that large scale participation of women during Gandhiji's salt march. Thousands of women came out of their homes to listen to him. They participated in protest march, manufactured salt, okay, and picketed foreign clothes and liquor shops. Many went to jail. In urban areas, these women were from high caste families because they had nothing to do. They wanted to show their power, and they also wanted to do something for the country. So that is why, because you see, the lower caste families were not allowed. Still you can say, still the caste feeling was too high that the lower caste woman cannot work with the high caste woman, right? Okay, and they are mostly busy in meeting both the ends. So in that case, naturally, only the high caste people who are rich, right, they can only participate in this. And in rural areas, they came from rich peasants' households, as I told you, moved by Gandhiji's call. They began to see service to the nation as the sacred duty of women. Yet this increased public role did not necessarily mean any radical change in the way the position of women was visualized. So see here, though the women started participating in the national movement, but the mentality towards the woman did not change in the society. Okay, people were that means the guardians were not very happy with sending their daughters or sisters or wives to these public places. Okay, and the caste system and all these things remain same. Okay, so you can see the prejudices against the woman or stereotyping was still there. So Gandhiji was convinced that it was the duty of women to look after home and health, be good mothers and good wives, and for long time the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization. Even in the Congress also, women candidates or women leaders were almost no one, right? So you can understand that your perception against women was still very of low quality or the old mentality. So it was keen only on their symbolic presence. Okay, so the women are our mother, the goddesses, and all these things. But of course, sorry, stay at home, don't come out, stay protected, right? And you do not need to participate in any public movement or something like that. All right. So that was one thing. Now topic number 3 is 3.3 is the limits of CDM, that I will start in the next class. So I hope you understand what we talked about, right? So we saw, okay, if I just have a very quick recapitulation, then you saw that why the how Gandhi came in the Indian politics, right? You can say when the World War was going on, and what he saw in the First World War, what he saw in Khilafat, that how the Turkish Ottoman Empire was disintegrated. So the Muslims were angry with India, with the Britishers, and Gandhi saw an opportunity to unite the Muslims and the Hindus. So he started Khilafat and non-cooperation movement. Why he started non-cooperation movement? I told you that so that we should not cooperate with the Britishers, and Britishers will get weak and they will leave the country within a year. This is what Gandhi thought, okay, but it did not happen. So after some incident of Simon Commission and other things, Gandhi again started in 1929. He started another movement which is called CDM, right? He went for RTC, the second RTC, and Gandhi Arvind Pact, and you can say Gandhi's 11 demands that you have already seen, right? Those things were there. Then you saw that he went to London for RTC. That RTC failed. He came back and he started again. He relaunched the CDM, but this time it has lost its steam and it was not very successful movement. And anyway, no movement, as I told you, that will go for indefinite period of time. So it had to die down. And by 1934, it was almost gone. Right. So now you have to see that what was the aspirations of the people in NCM and what was the aspiration of the people in CDM, and you saw that there was a difference, because in CDM mostly the rich peasant participated, right? In NCM mostly the poor peasant participated. In CDM we saw that the tribals are nowhere, right? Industrialist people participated mostly in CDM, right? And why? Because they wanted that the discrimination and the economic policy should be done away with, but that it did not take place. So they were also not very happy with the British, with the Congress, and Congress was also in dilemma whether to go with the industrialists or with the working class. So that also went on, right? So with this I leave you now, and we will see in the next class that what was the topic? Okay, what was the wait a minute. Yeah, what was that? Yeah, the limits of the CDM, that means why CDM was not successful. All these things we will see in the next class. Okay, all right. Okay, so I leave you now. See you in the next class. Bye bye. Good night. Bye bye. Bye. Thank you.